the Sarah Lawrence College cult. Larry, his daughter Talia, her best friend and new girlfriend, Isabella, Talia's now ex-boyfriend, Santos, Claudia, and Daniel would move into a one-bedroom apartment on the Upper East Side off campus. Their sleeping arrangements in the apartment were definitely a bit odd. In the bedroom, on a singular king-size bed, would sleep Larry, his daughter Talia, and her best friend and Larry's new girlfriend, Isabella.
So 3 of them
and
the
then
same bed.
Everybody else, the entire living room floor was packed with either sofas, blow-up mattresses, or these foldable mattresses just laid out on the ground like a giant bed. Everyone else was free to sleep there.
Wait, so Isabella is like everybody knows that they're dating or sleeping together?
It's pretty clear
girlfriend?
that they're sleeping together.
Okay.
Yes. Sometimes the others were asked to leave and go find a place to stay for the night for whatever reason. Most of the time, they would just sleep in the living room. And they would have all of their stuff stuffed into these tiny closets of this apartment. The whole place was clutter. But most nights, Larry would kick everyone out of the bedroom, even Isabella and Talia, so he could call his girlfriend in LA. He's got a girlfriend in LA. Felicia. Larry would get all giddy on the phone to see what Felicia had done the night before, if she had any videos to show him. By this point, Larry has fully brainwashed the students into believing that they're all messed up mentally and they want to self-exit, and the only person that can save them from themselves is Larry. And he's doing this because these kids are his precious daughter's friends. Outside of class, he's controlling every aspect of their lives. What they eat, when they sleep, what they do all day, who they talk to. He started really abusing the girls, forcing them to record themselves having intimate relations with strangers. But eventually he gets involved. The threesomes, there's going to be a lot of threesomes. The threesomes actually start as twosomes with Daniel and Isabella. One night in the cramped one-bedroom apartment, Daniel is trying to fall asleep on the leather couch when a little after 3 a.m., the door to the bedroom creaks open and out walks Isabella. She's not really dressed. She's wearing this thin cotton shirt that barely covers anything. She starts creeping towards Daniel on the couch. Oh, what is going on? That night, she would engage in oral activities with Daniel. It's a very mixed feeling, Daniel said. On one hand, he's a guy, and like Larry said, Isabella's stunning. She seems enthusiastic to be doing this. They're both of age, so technically there's nothing wrong with the situation. But a part of him keeps looking over at the bedroom door where Larry and Talia are, and the room door is open. So it feels strange. It almost feels like Isabella was ordered to come out here and do this. And from that night forward, it just kept happening until Larry starts joining in. The first time Isabella and Daniel are alone in the bedroom, having intimate relations, of course, right at that moment when they're both unclothed, the door slams open and in walks Larry. What is the best way to have intimate adult relations? With Gregorian chants playing in the background. 13th century Gregorian chants. Larry walks over to his computer, presses play. 13th century Gregorian music.
So 3 of them?
This is part 2 on what happened to Jaylene Candelario. When police arrived at the house, they found Jaylene in a shocking condition. She was lying in a urine and feces soiled playpen. She had sunken and dry eyes. She had dry and cracked lips. And she also had fecal matter inside her mouth and underneath her fingernails. Surprisingly, however, Jaylene's clothes were completely clean, which indicated to police that Crystal had tried to clean her up to mask what she had done. Despite doing that, nothing would be able to mask the horrific state that Jaylene was found in. During her interview with police, Crystal said that Jaylene had been sick all week long, and that when she woke up that day, she discovered that Jaylene was unresponsive and that she realized that her daughter looked dehydrated, which then prompted her to call 911 right away, which, as we know, was a complete lie because she was on vacation that entire week. Suspicious of her story, the police took her to the homicide unit for further questioning. In the second interview, she said that she did actually leave earlier that week to go work as an Uber driver in Detroit. Police were like, okay, why did you have to go be an Uber driver in Detroit? And she was like, oh, well, my friend lived there, so I wanted to go visit my friend and also work at the same time. So she admitted to leaving to Michigan, but never said anything about Puerto Rico. Nothing Crystal was telling the police made any sense, so they decided to further investigate, and that's when they discovered that she actually left to Puerto Rico for 10 days. With this, Crystal was arrested, and then on February 22nd, 2024, she pled guilty to aggravated murder and endangering children as part of a plea deal. During her sentencing, the defense team tried to make it seem like this was an act of insanity. They claimed that she was suffering from mental health issues and that she just wasn't thinking straight. The prosecution immediately tore down this narrative. They were like, no, she was sane enough to buy a plane ticket, to go through security at the airport, to get on the plane, get to the hotel, take pictures, edit the photos, post them on Facebook, write captions. Like, she was clearly sane during this time. Jaylene's cause of death was also revealed during this time, and it revealed that Jaylene died to starvation and severe dehydration. The medical examiner stated that Jaylene had actually tried to eat her own in order to survive. Now, before hearing her sentence, Crystal expressed how sorry she was, how she made a big mistake, but that she knows that God and her daughter have forgiven her. She said that she was dealing with a lot of mental health issues at this time and that she hopes to reunite with Jaylene one day. In the end, Crystal was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge said that Crystal defied one of the most basic human responsibilities and committed the ultimate act of betrayal against her daughter. What Crystal did is just truly evil, and the fact that she says that she knows Jaylene forgives her is just insane. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family. This is just so upsetting, and I just truly hope that Jaylene is resting in peace.
The terrifying serial killer that inspired the horror movie Scream. In the late summer of 1990, Gainesville, Florida was being absolutely terrorized by a string of brutal murders of college-aged girls. It all started when the bodies of 17-year-old Sonia Larson and 17-year-old Christina Powell were found in their apartment, brutally stabbed to death. Christina had been SA'd and mutilated, and both girls' bodies were posed in a suggestive position. Both girls were supposed to start their first year of college the following Monday. The very next day, the body of 18-year-old Krista Hoyt was found inside of her apartment. Life had been taken the exact same way. SA'd, stabbed, mutilated, and then posed. College students in and around Gainesville, Florida were terrified. Classes were meant to start that week. Thousands of students had just left their parents to come to college, and now 3 girls were brutally stabbed to death within 24 hours, and they lived like 2 miles away from each other. It was chaos in Gainesville, Florida. Students were withdrawing their enrollment into college or transferring schools within hours. Stores were sold out of padlocks, pepper sprays, tasers, baseball bats, you name it. And what was happening to the young girls in Gainesville, Florida started to make news around the country. Family and friends of college students were calling their loved ones to make sure they were okay. And that's exactly what happened to 23-year-old Tracy Pauls. Tracy was in her apartment when she got a call from a concerned friend. She told her friend, "Hey, I'm safe and I feel safe," because Tracy had a 23-year-old male roommate named Manny Thibodeau. Manny was like 6 foot tall, super strong, really big. He was like a former football player. Tracy felt absolutely safe living with this ginormous man. Tragically, within minutes of getting off the phone call with her friend, the killer broke into their apartment as well, unaliving Manny and then SAing, stabbing, mutilating, and posing Tracy the same way he did the other girls. Absolutely no one felt safe, and the police were feeling pressure to make an arrest, and they actually did make an arrest the following day. After receiving dozens of tips for the police to look into one particular creepy college freshman at the University of Florida, the police brought in 19-year-old Ed Humphreys into custody. Ed was kind of odd and distant. He had this really bad scarring around his mouth that he actually got in a really bad car accident the year before, but that didn't matter to anyone. Ed looked scary, and people were scared. And despite not even having the same blood type as the killer, Ed was kept in police custody for 10 months. And even after they found the real killer and Ed's name was cleared, Ed Humphreys said that his reputation and his life were permanently altered after being accused of these heinous killings. It was around this time that the investigators actually got a tip that there was a similar unsolved crime to their slayings in Gainesville. A year prior to the slayings in Gainesville, the bodies of 56-year-old Tom Grissom, 8-year-old Sean Grissom, and 24-year-old Julie Grissom were found stabbed to death inside the Grissom home. Julie had been SA'd, stabbed, and posed just like the college girls that were murdered in Gainesville. And the connection between the victims in Gainesville and now the Grissom family murder was actually leaked to the public, which led to a tip from a Louisiana local woman who said that she might know who's responsible for all of these deaths. That lady, Cindy, called the investigators and told them that she knew of a 37-year-old man named Danny Rowling. He had a history of being creepy towards women, a large rap sheet of armed robberies, and recently was let out of prison and living a half-mile away from the Grimsons at the time the Grimsons were killed. Cindy also told the investigators that after the Grimson family was stabbed to death, Danny told her husband that he had a problem and he liked stabbing people. Cindy girl, I appreciate you coming forward when you did, but how did you not connect the dots earlier? Cindy also told the investigators that 3 months before the killings in Gainesville, Florida started, Danny left Louisiana and no one knew where he was. So Danny is definitely looking like a really good suspect, but the police had to prove that he was in Gainesville, Florida at the time that these students were being killed. Danny had this history of armed robberies, and a week before the killings started in Gainesville, there was actually an unsolved armed robbery of a bank. The robber got away with a duffel bag full of money, but the bank teller actually booby-trapped the money, so when the robber tried to mess with it, that red dye would explode all over the money and make it worthless. Police actually found that duffel bag full of red stained money discarded in the woods, and with the duffel bag was a tape recorder, and what's recorded on that tape recorder you will never believe. On the tape was a man singing a little song that he had written about being a mystery killer. It was literally a confession right there for the police.
We push play and we hear this guy singing on there.
As soon as the tape starts playing, I hear Danny playing the guitar.
And even more unbelievable, at the end of the recording, the man said his full name, Danny Rowling. When Danny was arrested, at first he claimed that he was innocent, but he eventually did confess to the killings of all 8 victims. He never expressed remorse or gave a motive for why he did this, but it is said that all of the female victims look strikingly similar to his mother. Danny was sentenced to the death penalty, but first he was able to given a chance to speak, like speak to the victims, maybe apologize. That's what a lot of people do. Whether or not they accept apologies, that's on the family. But instead of doing any of that, Danny actually stood up and sang a song to his girlfriend.
Rules say I have to give Mr. Rowling an opportunity to have a say. You have anything you want to say, Mr. Rowling?
Well, sir, if it please the court, could I address the court?
Sure, say whatever you want to say.
Thank you. And, I recall the day I first saw you. I reached out to say I love you, but it was hard to say. I couldn't touch you. So tell me, baby, what were my words? All my tears run together.
Excuse me, Mr. Rowling.
Down the
Mr.
path
Rowling.
you choose
Mr. Rowling.
to follow.
Mr. Rowling.
Tell me, baby, what were my words? All my tears run together.
What a creep. Danny Rowling was executed in 2006. This was definitely something straight out of my nightmare for sure. Let me know if you guys ever heard this case before. If you watched the end, thank you so much. Let me know what case you will want to see next. And I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.
I just saw the new horror movie Abigail, and oh my goodness, we need to talk about it. I got to see it a day early. Here's my whole spoiler-free review. I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw the trailer several months ago, I thought it looked pretty dumb. But I ended up really enjoying it. For those who don't know, the very basic premise is this group of people get paid a lot of money to kidnap a girl. And they basically have to bunker down with this girl in this house for 24 hours before they can give her back for the ransom money. But this little girl is obviously a vampire, as they figure out over the course of the story. And I really thought that was going to be it. I didn't think there was going to be any more real interesting factors besides what they show in the trailer, but I was pleasantly surprised. Lots of fun action, lots of mystery going on, and a really, really strong cast. Melissa Barrera, excellent job. Catherine Newton, also excellent job. I was really worried they were going to overdo the whole ballerina thing, because my prediction when I saw the trailer was they only made her a ballerina because of the popularity of Megan and the dancing memes. But I will say they kept the ballerina aspects to a minimum, and I was grateful for that because it really just felt random in the whole story, to be honest. But Act 3 will keep you on your toes. Things are changing a mile a minute and stuff is going everywhere. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. Very fun watch. Honestly, like top 3 of the new horror films I've seen this year so far. Like, it was pretty fun.
In 1983, 25-year-old Patricia Tigham and her husband Trevor Jans were hiking in the Canadian Rockies near Montana when they stumbled across several grizzly bear cubs standing around a freshly killed animal to feast on. Only seconds pass before they both have the realization that them standing this close to bear cubs cannot be good. And that theory would be proven true, as moments later a 700-pound mama grizzly bear charged at frightening speeds towards Trevor. It closed its teeth down around his thigh and slung him to the ground. And so as Patricia is witnessing her husband being mauled, his jaw and nose both broken in the process, she quickly runs to the nearest tree and begins climbing it. The noise of her climbing the tree only catches the bear's attention, and it turns around to see her and quickly climbs up the tree after her at rapid speeds and ultimately swats her down to the ground. In Patricia's book, she would later describe the attack in very short, powerful sentences, saying, quote, "Crunch of my bones, slurps, heavy animal breathing, thick animal smell, no pain, so fast, jaws around my head, not aggressive, just chewing, like a dog with a bone." But just as fast as this dual attack happened, it stopped. The grizzly bear walked away, taking her cubs with her, but not without leaving Patricia with extensive facial injuries. Her entire left side of her face was destroyed. She was blind in one eye, with both the top and bottom eyelids ripped off, and the back of her scalp completely missing. Eventually, 2 other hikers stumbled across the couple and helped them to the hospital, where later each spouse was desperate to find out how the other was doing. Patricia would later write in her book about this bear attack that when she finally looked into the mirror at herself, she was sick to her stomach at what she saw, and that what she was looking at was not even her. Patricia endured more than 30 surgeries, crippling pain, and extreme mental illness following this bear attack for years and years to come. And unfortunately, on December 20th of 2005, Patricia would go on to remove herself from this world due to the after effects that lasted more than 20 years following the attack.
Ranking horror movie villains from least evil to most evil. At the very bottom is Jason Voorhees. He's being told to do all of these things from beyond the grave, and I don't even think he would want to be doing anything at all. I think he'd rather just be dead. Leatherface is also a victim like Jason, but Leatherface does have a little bit more free will than Jason. Leatherface has grown up in an incredibly abusive household with a lot of unstable family members. He has suffered physical and emotional abuse his entire life. Leatherface is also more likely to show regret and a desire to help certain victims throughout the series. Then we have Jigsaw. Now we're getting somewhere. John Kramer is putting these people into traps, into these death machines, because he wants them to survive. He wants them to have a new good sense of life. Obviously his logic is flawed and his god complex is going crazy. But even though he's doing these horrible things, he does still want them to survive. For the most part. That's why John's complicated. And I think he's the perfect spot on the list to show the exact middle transition between not really evil and really evil. He's right there in the middle. Now we have Art the Clown. Now, he does some of the most horrific things on this list. He is a very violent and brutal being. However, Art the Clown is really just doing this for the chaos of it, for the fun of it. He gets some enjoyment out of the sadism, obviously. But I would argue that Art is doing these things indiscriminately. He's not really picking out specifically who he wants to go after for the most part. He's just doing it to do it, which is obviously bad, but not as bad as it could be. Michael Myers is coming in at number 3. Yes, I know he's the true embodiment of evil or whatever, I don't buy it. If you look at the facts, whether you believe that he's a man or a supernatural beast, we see that he methodically goes after certain people and he is capable of stalking and making decisions. I think 3 is a comfortable place for Michael Myers. I'm actually wrestling a lot between my number 1 and number 2 spots, because what I have left is Freddy Krueger and Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter is a pure psychopath who is capable of murdering, dismembering, and harvesting and eating the organs of dozens of people. And he does it with absolutely no regret. And he's just a human being. That is, he's not supernatural in any capacity. Hannibal literally views human beings as nothing more than pigs to be slaughtered. He views them all as beneath him, as his food. But then you have Freddy Krueger, whose demographic is children. And I think the fact that Freddy Krueger actively chooses to go after such a vulnerable demographic is what makes him so evil. But yeah, I'll bite my words a little bit. I'll give you that Hannibal Lecter can be number 2, but only because the number 1 literally goes after children. Freddy Krueger would be the most evil, probably.
This is part 2 on what happened to Emily Peguero. So when the family was looking at the surveillance footage, they realized that Emily was never at the gas station. She never once appeared on the surveillance footage, and none of the employees remember seeing her. Not only was Emily never at the gas station, but neither was Marlon. So did Marlon confuse which gas station he dropped Emily off at, or was he lying? As soon as Emily's mom saw this, she called the police and she reported her daughter as missing. Right away, Emily's family and the public immediately started pointing their fingers at her boyfriend Marlon and at his mom Marlene. The family truly felt like the mother and son duo had kidnapped Emily to force her to have an The reason they thought this is because, again, they knew that Marlene was not happy about the pregnancy, that she did not want her son to have this baby, and that she would do anything to protect her reputation. So what did Marlon and his mom do to address these rumors? Well, they decided to hold a press conference in their living room. In the press conference, Marlon looked really nervous. He didn't really want to make eye contact with the camera, and he was basically begging for Emily to come home. Then his mother, Marlene, took over, and she was basically saying that all of the rumors were a lie, that they had nothing to do with Emily's disappearance, that they loved Emily, that they accepted the baby, that they accepted her into their family, and that Emily was his son's girlfriend. Then she quickly corrected herself and said, not was, but is my son's girlfriend. So she realized that she was speaking about Emily in past tense. Despite this press conference, the family and the public were still very suspicious of Marlon and Marlene. And unfortunately, their suspicions were right. August 26, 2017, Marlon Martinez turned himself in. Then, just a few days later, on August 30th, his mom Marlene also turned herself in and was arrested. As she was arrested, reporters were asking her, did you have something to do with Emily's disappearance? And she replied by saying, quote, I'm not an accomplice, I never would. I only acted as a mother. The next day, on August 31st, 2017, a suitcase was found on the side of the road in a town about an hour away from where Emily lived. And unfortunately, inside the suitcase was 16-year-old Emily Peguero. Someone had put her inside the suitcase and just left her on the side of the road as if she was nothing. The autopsy was conducted and it revealed that she had trauma to her abdomen and also trauma to her skull. The medical examiner believed that Emily died due to a botched. The trial began and what happened to Emily was revealed. It turns out that day on August 23rd, Marlon never took Emily to the clinic. In fact, he took her to his mom's empty apartment and then forced her to drink an unknown liquid. This unknown liquid was supposed to cause Emily to have but something went wrong. Emily started to bleed a lot and she's kind of started to fight Marlon off, and that's when he decided to push her and then she fell and hit her head. After this, surveillance footage from the apartment shows him carrying Emily's body in a sack. After this, he called his mom and asked her for help in covering up the crime scene and hiding Emily's body, and the mom agreed to help him. Again, Marlene is saying that she acted like a mom would, but I don't think a lot of moms would do this. I don't think a lot of moms would help their son cover up a murder. In the end, Marlon was sentenced to 30 years in prison and Marlene only received 5 years, which was actually later reduced to only 2 years. And she has since been released and is now out and about living her life. What happened to Emily is just absolutely horrifying. She trusted these people and they betrayed her in the worst way possible.
When a teenager found his family's dead bodies, he thought it was a Halloween prank. It was Halloween 2010 and Devon Griffiths arrived back at his home in Ohio. He'd been at his dad's house the night before. When he returned to the family home in the morning, he bumped into his stepbrother William on the driveway. He went in the house and played video games until he got a call. The caller was his step-auntie, and she was really concerned. She asked why no one had been replying to her messages or calls. Now, this was the first that Devon had heard of this, so he decided to go upstairs and see if he could find his parents to ask. He had no idea what he was about to discover. Upstairs was a blood-soaked scene. After initially thinking that this was a Halloween prank that had been set up for him to find, the reality of the situation started dawning on Devon. His mum Susan and his stepdad Bill were deceased. His brother Derek was also lying deceased, and they were all on the bed. Now, the couple had been killed by gunshot wounds, and Derek had been bludgeoned to death. Devon's mum had been SA'd too. Police were called and raced to the scene, and they noted that there was no sign of forced entry. They started interviewing neighbours, had they seen or heard anything that could be helpful. One ear witness reported hearing banging at around 6:30 a.m. Investigators also started looking into anybody that could have potentially not liked the family or wanted to cause them harm in some way. Devon's stepbrother William was soon under the spotlight. He had a violent past, and there were claims that he actually really didn't like Susan at all. There were claims that he didn't agree with his dad marrying her. Alarmingly, his criminal record showed that he'd previously been charged for assaulting Susan and stealing her car. Frustratingly, though, the charges had been dropped. Now, it was reported that William's dad actually banned William from staying over the night at the house. However, that night in particular, they were having a party, so he ended up being there much later than was normally allowed. As Devon had spotted, he was still there in the morning. Now, officers were on the hunt to find missing William. He was originally nowhere to be found until finally police tracked him down around 170 miles away from the crime scene in a cabin. He was found to have all 3 victims' DNA on him when he was found. He originally denied having anything to do with it and was facing the death penalty, but then he had a change of heart. He confessed to his mum over the telephone that he did in fact kill the 3 victims. He told the court that he was struggling with his mental health and that Satan was to blame. He was sentenced to 3 life terms in prison, but after just 4 years behind bars, he took his own life.
The once-in-a-lifetime Nova explosion that everyone is waiting for right now is happening really soon, and if you want to make sure you don't miss this, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about how you can watch it. So basically, this once-in-a-lifetime Nova explosion may create a new star in the night sky tonight, and they're saying it could be anywhere from right now up until September, so really soon. This star is happening in the Corona Borealis constellation in the sky, so if you want to look that up, you can see where it is in your area. So that's just the constellation, but the specific star that's having the outburst is called T Corona Borealis. The T Corona Borealis actually has a nickname. People call it the Blaze Star, so if you can't find it, look up that. If you want to make sure you don't miss this whenever it happens, I'm going to be filming it. I'm also going to be going live, and I'm going to post reminders, so make sure you add me so you can come back. There's a ton of apps that you can download to be able to search for all the stars. I'm using Sky Safari, but there's also a ton others, but I was able to search the Blaze Star and I found it. At around 10 p.m. for me, this is where it's at in the sky. If you want to make sure you don't miss this, I'm going to be posting reminders, but I'm also going to be filming this and going live whenever it happens, so make sure you add me and just come back.
This man was tricked into getting married by this person who he thought was a woman. In 2023, this 26-year-old Indonesian man named AK met Adinda Kanza on Instagram, where they hit it off and eventually met in person and started a relationship. Throughout their relationship, Adinda wore a hijab that covered her head, her face, except for her eyes because of her religion. A year later, they got married and had a very small ceremony with only AK's family attending, and Adinda's family was not there because she said that her entire family had passed away. After they tied the knot, AK became extremely suspicious of his new wife because she constantly avoided any intimacy and was always making excuses. But also, AK said that Adinda was wearing her hijab at home at all times, so at this point he knew that she was hiding something. He then began searching for any information he can find on his wife, and that's when he found her old address, and when he went to go visit that home, he found her parents, which she said were dead. The parents told AK that Adinda is actually a man, and they had no idea that they got married. Adinda was arrested, and after an investigation was done, it was determined that he intended to marry AK so that he can steal his family's assets. Adinda was charged with fraud, and if convicted, he faces up to 4 years in prison.
People say when things are in motion, they stay in motion. If you calmly walk up to a ball, a basketball, and it's stationary sitting on a table and you bump your head against it, it's likely going to be unpleasant. It's not going to kill you. You probably won't even have a bump on your head. Now, if that same ball is thrown off the penthouse unit of a 98th floor apartment and it hits you on the head, you might be hospitalized. Things in motion have a lot of force. The train that Lee and Gia were on weighs 2,000 tons, about the weight of 200 giant elephants. But now it's going 45 miles per hour and ramming straight into Gia. The impact of the injury something like that would cause, it's more comparable to 3,100 elephants running over her. Gia is laying there for a moment until the realization hits her. If she does not move soon, another train is going to come down and completely rip the rest of her body apart. She said, if I do not leave the tracks as soon as possible, I will be shattered. But when she goes to move, there's this really strange sensation. She tries to move her left arm, but it's like her arm does not belong to her. It does not listen, it does not move, it does not budge. It's weird. She's straining so hard to move that arm, she can feel the veins in her head bulging, throbbing, but nothing. Nothing is moving. All she can do is sit on the cold railroad tracks that are digging into her back and smell that awful metallic scent. At first, she thought that metallic scent was likely the rusted railroad tracks, but she realizes soon enough it's the scent of her blood. She uses all of her strength to lift her head up by her neck, and she looks down at the state of her body. Her left arm is almost completely detached. Her left thigh is gone. Her right hand, the only hand she has left, is full of sticky liquid. Blood. The thought to just let it be is the first thing on her mind. What's done is done. Look at her. She can't even put herself back together. There's no way she's gonna survive. That's what she's thinking. After laying there, she decides she has to try. And she musters up every last bit of strength and moves her face off the track, just inches away. But at least this time, her face won't be sliced in half. By now, she's in a trance until she feels a vibration. Her whole body starts vibrating and there's a loud roaring sound. She opens up an eye and sees the train heading straight towards her. She said in that moment, perhaps my determination touched the heavens. I heard the train. I was bursting with joy. This was the only hope for salvation, and I must not give up. I quickly thought how to let the train driver know that I was there, that I was a living, injured person. I knew what I had to do. So I waited nervously, waiting for the light, and the light comes, shines over her whole body, and she said, I put all my strength I had into lifting my head up as high as I could so that the train engineer, the driver of the train, could see me. And I waited until the lights passed all the way through my body, and then I lost consciousness again. She does get the attention of the train crew. They pull the emergency brake, stop a mile away, run. They run to her side and call the police to come save her.
A movie theater accidentally showed a horror movie to a bunch of kids instead of the movie Megamind. It was for an exclusive showing for a 7-year-old kid's birthday party. And that film was Saw 3D, which opens up with a woman being sawed in half with a buzzsaw. Apparently, movie theater employees recognized the mistake pretty quickly. However, it was too late. By the time they actually managed to switch the movie back to Megamind, all of the 7-year-olds had already seen the entire first trap of the movie, plus the scene where the doctor's crawling around missing a foot. They were all given free tickets, but the parents were very upset. The parents of the birthday child even went so far as to say, my kid hasn't slept in our bed in years because of nightmares, but right now, our kid is in our bed every night. They are terrified because of what they saw. Saw. But this isn't even the first mix-up they've had with a Saw movie versus a kids movie. Yeah, back when the B movie was still in theaters, they accidentally showed Saw 4 to a group of children instead of the B movie. Which, that movie opens up with a naked man being autopsied, so I don't really know which one is worse, seeing that or seeing a woman getting sawed in half.
The Sherman has an insanely strong high explosive shell despite the smaller cannon on it, and I did some research and some math and put together a picture for you guys to show you just how strong it really was. In true American fashion, I will be using a field from a sport to measure distance. We're going to start with the red circle down here at the pitcher's mound, which is 18 feet across. I am aware it explodes in a butterfly pattern like this, but we're going to pretend it explodes in a circle to keep things simple. So the M48 high explosive shell has about 1.5 pounds of TNT in it. If you are standing at about 9 feet away from it, you are guaranteed going to get a blast injury. At only 6.5 feet away, you're going to get obliterated at over 100 PSI. Nobody's surviving that. Everyone inside of that red circle is getting a blast injury, and that's just when the shockwave hits your body so hard it compresses your fluids into the porous spaces of your body. It puts blood in your lungs and you suffocate to death. While the red circle represents a guarantee of blast injury, the orange circle represents the maximum range at which blast injury will occur. The yellow circle represents the range at which you have a very high likelihood of receiving a face full of shrapnel. If you had a bunch of people standing next to each other, someone's getting dropped every 5 feet. And the blue circle just represents the range at which the shrapnel will penetrate cover, specifically 1/8-inch mild steel. But technically, that shrapnel could go anywhere in this baseball field. Nowhere is safe. Keep in mind though, this is all assuming perfect conditions.